Drake wasn't done taking the battle from the booth to the courtroom, and this morning, the judge just handed him...
I think Drake is going to ask for something that no artist has ever asked for or received as far as compensation for damages.
A gavel fell, and the room didn't just go quiet, it shifted. In one ruling, the court said the loudest line in hip-hop isn't drawn in lawsuits, it's drawn in verses. Drake's case against UMG didn't just get tossed, it got translated. In a diss, the sharpest bars are read as heat of battle talk, not sworn facts. That's a boundary the culture has lived by for decades, written now in legal ink. And for Drake, that ink stains more than a case file. It stains the story he'd been trying to rewrite. Because this wasn't about a single lyric. It was about leverage. Reputation, leverage. Business leverage. The kind you use when a record won't stop echoing, and you need something bigger than a rebuttal to make the room forget. He tried to relocate the fight from playlists to pleadings, from stadium speakers to a courtroom calendar. The bet was simple. If the law says the line was crossed, then the narrative resets. But the verdict didn't reset anything. It froze it. There's a bill attached to that freeze, not just the legal hours and polished statements. The real cost is momentum. Every week spent chasing a ruling is a week the audience memorizes the other side's hook a little tighter. Every headline about filings is one less headline about your next record. You can buy reach. You can't buy rewind. And when a song becomes shorthand for a moment, it doesn't need a court to keep winning. It just needs another weekend. Now, the center of gravity moves to a different table. The labels. Catalog is a money machine that hums in the dark. New music is a light switch that only flips if someone pays the bill. The statement from the building is polite. The decisions inside it rarely are. Do you pour fuel into the next single and try to bulldoze the memory? Or let the back catalog mint while the storm spins itself out? That's not drama. That's math. There's also the appeal card. It buys time, not belief. Appeals don't retry a feeling. They re-argue a principle. Meanwhile, the timeline keeps sprinting. The clips keep multiplying. The jokes get shorter and meaner until they fossilize into a sentence people say at parties. When that happens, the only solvent is an undeniable record, one that moves faster than the meme and louder than the verdict. So here's the real trial, not the one with transcripts, the one with turnstiles, car stereos, and gym playlists. If Drake wants the story back, he has to pull it by the chorus, not by the complaint. The court settled the rules. The culture will settle the score. Again. And this time, there's only one piece of evidence that counts. A song so heavy it bends the whole timeline toward it. When the judge's decision dropped, it wasn't just another headline in the endless feed. It was the sound of a door slamming on an entire strategy. Drake had tried something no rapper in history had dared, turning a rap beef into a court case. The claim was bold, that Not Like Us, the anthem that split the internet in half, crossed the line from competition to defamation. That it wasn't just bars, it was damage. In theory, it was the kind of move that could rewrite the rules of rap. If the court agreed, it would mean that words, lyrics, metaphors, jabs, and jokes could suddenly have a price tag. The moment that happened, every MC would need a lawyer sitting next to their engineer. But the court didn't see it that way. The judge made it plain. This was art, not accusation. The words might sting, the crowd might roar, but under the law, that's opinion. Exaggeration baked into the culture of hip-hop. The phrase she used, non-actionable opinion, wasn't just legal jargon. It was a message. Diss tracks live in the gray area where ego and performance blur. You can't sue someone for being better at turning pain into poetry. And that's where Drake's gamble collapsed. The lawsuit wasn't just about Not Like Us. It was about regaining control of the narrative, showing that the attacks had gone too far, that the joke had worn out, but the judge didn't validate the emotion behind it. She separated hurt from harm. She said, in effect, you stepped into the ring. This is what the ring looks like. That's the sting. The law ruled that rap beef is a protected battlefield. And if that's true, it means you can't win this kind of war with paperwork. You have to win it with playback, with verses that hit so hard the audience forgets who filed first. Drake walked into court trying to silence a song. He walked out as proof that no song can be silenced by a summons. The same beat that carried the diss now carries the precedent. But the real cost of that precedent isn't in the ruling. It's in what came next. Because when the courtroom doors closed, the bills started stacking faster than the streams. Every empire has its PR department, and when an artist as massive as Drake steps into a courtroom, that department turns into a war room. Every press release becomes a chess move. Every leak, every source close to the situation, every perfectly timed tweet is meant to do one thing: control perception. Because in modern rap, perception is currency. If you can't flip the story, you flip the optics. You flood timelines with talking points, bury the memes under headlines, and make sure your name trends for the lawsuit, not the loss. But none of that comes cheap. Journalists close to the case estimated that Drake's PR and legal efforts ran into hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. That's the price of trying to rewrite a story that's already gone viral. Each email, each media pitch, each crisis meeting is $1 spent trying to drown out a hook that refuses to die. But here's the catch. You can't algorithm your way out of emotion. You can buy space, but you can't buy belief. The audience doesn't scroll through court filings. They scroll through punchlines. While the PR teams were crafting narratives about artistic integrity, fans were cutting memes out of courtroom photos. While lawyers debated defamation, the internet decided humiliation. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Every week spent in legal limbo was another week, Not Like Us picked up new life on TikTok, at clubs, on radio sets, even at NBA games. The track Drake wanted buried became the soundtrack of summer, then autumn, then the year. The lawsuit that was supposed to bury it accidentally broadcast it louder. There's a cruel irony in that. The more you fight to prove you were wronged, the more the audience wonders if you actually were. The moment you file, you move from artist to litigant, and fans don't rally around plaintiffs. They rally around moments, and this one belonged to Kendrick. At that point, even winning wouldn't have felt like a victory. The money burned couldn't buy back credibility. Because credibility isn't restored in statements, it's rebuilt in sound. And the lawyers might have left the courtroom, but the accountants didn't. Because there's another number that started blinking red right after the ruling, one inside the very building that funds the music. That number sat on UMG's balance sheet, and the question became simple. Is Drake still an investment or just a legacy asset? Behind the polished statement from Universal Music Group, we look forward to continuing our successful partnership with Drake. There's a conversation happening in boardrooms that sounds nothing like press language. Labels don't speak in feelings, they speak in forecasts. And every forecast starts with a single question. Does this artist still generate growth? Or are we living off the interest? UMG's public reaction framed the lawsuit as a defense of creative freedom, not as a corporate grudge. But privately, the tone is colder. This case wasn't just another celebrity headline. It was a test of loyalty. Drake didn't sue a rival artist. He sued his own label, accusing the very machine that built him of fueling his downfall by promoting Not Like Us. That's the kind of accusation that lingers, even after the judge dismisses it. Inside any major label, budgets reflect belief. The more faith an exec has in your next record, the bigger the marketing spend. Billboards, playlisting, radio pushes, those aren't signs of love, they're signs of confidence. But confidence fades when risk spikes. And for UMG, Drake just became both a financial liability and a PR headache. Let's look at the numbers. Drake's old catalog, everything from Take Care to Scorpion, still racks up millions of streams daily. That's low maintenance profit. No marketing needed, no rollout costs, just perpetual royalties flowing in. But new Drake, the Iceman era, that's expensive. Videos, producers, features, influencers, and promo all cost real money, and those songs aren't charting like they used to. When an artist's new music doesn't outperform his old hits, labels start doing math instead of magic. The irony? Drake's lawsuit exposed exactly how much UMG owns of his catalog. That means even if they quietly sideline his future projects, they'll still make millions every time someone streams God's Plan. They don't need to crush him. They can simply let the algorithm do it for them. So while the press reads continuing partnership, the real question is, what kind of partnership? Do they still pour millions into a global rollout every time he drops? Or do they scale back, feeding him the minimum support while they milk the back catalog that's already paid off? Because corporate revenge rarely looks like confrontation. It looks like silence. No budget cuts on paper, just fewer calls, fewer meetings, less energy. The machine keeps humming, just not for you. And for an artist who's built his identity on domination, on being the headline, not the footnote, being quietly sidelined is worse than losing a lawsuit. It's like watching the spotlight dim, one skipped playlist at a time. But Drake's not one to sit quietly. He's already hinted that this isn't over. There's another move left on the chessboard, one that buys him time, but not necessarily redemption. Because even when the courtroom shuts its doors, the appeal window stays open. When the dismissal hit the press, most artists would have taken the loss, licked their wounds, and moved on. But Drake isn't wired like most artists. Within days, whispers started. He's appealing. Another filing. Another round. On paper, an appeal sounds powerful, like a comeback, a second chance at justice. But in reality, it's a pause button dressed as progress. Here's the truth about appeals. They don't retry the emotion of a case. They dissect the process. The appellate court won't re-listen to Not Like Us or reevaluate whether the bars were too far. They'll only ask if the first judge followed procedure. And unless Drake's team finds a procedural error, a technicality buried in hundreds of pages, there's no miracle waiting at the end of this road. But that might not be the point. Drake knows the odds. The appeal isn't about winning the case, it's about winning time. Every new filing extends relevance. Every hearing guarantees another wave of coverage. It keeps his name circulating while he figures out the next musical move. Still, time cuts both ways. The longer this drags on, the deeper the loss embeds itself in the culture. Each headline about a pending appeal keeps the wound fresh, keeps Not Like Us back on playlists, keeps the memes alive. It's like pressing replay on the worst song of your career, but you're the one hitting the button. The move feels strategic on paper, emotional in practice. It's the sound of someone who refuses to lose quietly. Drake's always been about control, of sound, of narrative, of timing. But control in music and control in law are two very different beasts. One rewards creativity, the other punishes persistence. And even if, by some cosmic twist, he wins the appeal, the victory won't undo the damage. The story's already told. The culture doesn't wait for court transcripts. It moves on the minute a new song drops. And in this era, headlines age faster than hits. So, while Drake's lawyers gear up for another round of legalese, the internet gears up for another round of jokes. Every filing becomes a meme. Every court date becomes content. Every delay looks less like strategy and more like denial. At some point, even his fans start asking the quiet question. If you have time to appeal, why don't you have time to drop? And that's where things get dangerous. Because in hip-hop, silence isn't patience, it's vulnerability. And the moment the audience senses hesitation, the wolves start circling. But Drake's silence isn't the only noise filling the room anymore. Because while his team's drafting motions, the culture is already reacting. The podcasts, the commentators, the critics, they're all turning the verdict into fuel. And the louder those voices get, the harder it becomes for Drake to drown them out. The moment the verdict went public, the reaction wasn't quiet or respectful. It was a feeding frenzy. Hip-hop didn't treat this like a legal story. It treated it like a rematch that ended before the bell even rang. The courtroom had barely cleared when social media started its own trial, and the timeline delivered a unanimous verdict. Drake lost the case, and the culture won the moment. Within hours, clips of Joe Budden's podcast were flooding X and TikTok. Joe, who'd been calling this outcome for months, didn't even need to gloat. His smirk said it all. He'd warned that this lawsuit could open a Pandora's box, that if Drake won, rap itself could be handcuffed. You can't sue over a diss, he laughed, or else hip-hop's dead tomorrow. The quote went viral, not because it was poetic, but because it was true. The energy was instant. Every outlet that covers rap, from underground commentators to verified journalists, latched onto the same angle. This wasn't a loss for Drake. It was a victory for free speech in music. The subtext was brutal. While Drake tried to control the conversation, the culture decided it didn't need his permission to speak. Then came the creators, reaction channels, TikTok breakdowns, meme pages. Everyone joined in. Some were dissecting the judge's exact phrasing. Others were clowning Drake's certified lawsuit boy era. Screenshots of the ruling became punchlines. One creator even remixed the judge's quote into a beat and titled it non-actionable. It trended for a weekend. The jokes worked because they told a truth fans already felt. This whole saga wasn't about justice. It was about ego. Hip-hop has always rewarded boldness, but punished sensitivity. The second you look like you're begging the audience to care, they stop. The lawsuit made Drake look defensive, the appeal made him look stubborn, and the silence after made him look unsure. In a genre built on confidence, that's lethal. Joe Budden's commentary only made it sting more. You can't lose a battle, then try to sue the scorekeeper, he said. That line echoed across podcasts and YouTube titles like Scripture. It didn't matter whether you liked Joe or hated him. He articulated what everyone was thinking. Drake had taken an L and then doubled down on it. And it wasn't just fans piling on. Other artists started chiming in. Subtweets, sly captions, cryptic emojis. You could feel the ecosystem shifting. The throne that once seemed untouchable suddenly looked crowded. For the first time in his career, Drake didn't seem like the one setting the tone. He seemed like the one reacting to it. And that's the part that hurts the most. Because the same community that built him up, the blogs, the fans, the influencers, was now dissecting every move like a cautionary tale. The lawsuit that was supposed to restore his image turned into the meme that defined it. But underneath the laughter, something more serious was happening. The industry was watching the fallout like a case study. Not just how Drake lost, but what happens when perception outpaces product. Because if the music doesn't move faster than the memes, you don't just lose control of the story. You lose control of your spot. And while the culture was busy roasting, the numbers started whispering something scarier. The diss still hasn't left the charts. Because when one song defines a narrative, it doesn't fade, it compounds. In hip-hop, numbers don't just measure success, they decide who's still relevant. Charts are the new scorecards, streams the new trophies. And in this case, the scoreboard told the same story as the memes. Not Like Us didn't just win a rap battle, it hijacked an entire year. Months after the lawsuit fizzled, the track was still climbing playlists, soundtracking sports highlights, TikTok edits, even political memes. It became the rare record that leapt from moment to movement, and that's what stung. Because Drake had always been the one who could take any moment, an insult, a rumor, a one-liner, and spin it into a global anthem. This time, the script flipped. The numbers painted it in real time. Not Like Us crossed the billion-stream mark, while Drake's post-lawsuit singles hovered mid-chart, even with expensive rollouts. When Noye stalled outside the top 10, fans noticed. When Iceman dropped and the streams didn't spike, the internet declared what the industry already suspected. The Drake effect was fading. And in a business where attention is oxygen, that's fatal. Here's the brutal math. A diss song that dominates the charts rewrites the market. It becomes cultural gravity. Every playlist it lands on pushes everything else down a slot, including your own releases. Every viral dance, every stream on a rival's record reinforces their dominance. You can't escape it because the very platforms you depend on are feeding it back to the public. Drake's lawsuit wasn't just about lyrics. It was an attempt to slow that gravitational pull, to prove the win wasn't legitimate, to disrupt the feedback loop that made Not Like Us untouchable. But by filing, he only strengthened it. The news cycle kept the track in rotation. The ridicule kept it in conversation. And by the time the court threw it out, the song wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural checkpoint. Think about it. A single diss track became so large it influenced how an entire generation defines artistic loss. That's unprecedented. Before this, a bad verse or flop album could be fixed with a comeback single. Now, the algorithm doesn't forget. The data becomes legend. And that's what makes this particular L so heavy. It's measurable. There's a timestamp, a chart position, a revenue gap. It's not abstract reputation damage. It's a permanent shift in musical hierarchy. Every day, Not Like Us racks up more plays. It cements the power balance between two artists who started the decade as peers. For Drake, the path forward isn't about pride, it's about math. He has to release something that outperforms the very song that ended him. Something that's not just catchy, but unavoidable. A record that makes people forget where the last chorus left them and reminds them why they cared in the first place. But making a hit like that isn't as simple as it used to be. Attention is fragmented. Trends move overnight. You can't brute force virality anymore. You have to earn it. And for the first time in his career, Drake might have to fight from below, not above. Still, hip-hop loves a comeback story. Every empire falls loud and rises quiet. The numbers may look bad now, but there's one kind of currency that can't be tracked on Spotify or Billboard, the emotional one. And if Drake wants to change his fate, he'll have to tap into that instead of spreadsheets. Because numbers crown you, but songs save you. And maybe, just maybe, that's where his next move begins. At this point, Drake's empire isn't collapsing, it's reorganizing. The lawsuits, the memes, the dismissals, the declining chart peaks, all of it has forced him into a position he's never truly been in before: the underdog. For 15 years, Drake's dominance came from anticipation. Every drop felt like an event, every feature a coronation. He was the weather system of hip-hop. When Drake moved, the industry adjusted. But the courtroom era changed that. The world stopped waiting for him and started watching him. Not for music, but for spectacle. And when the world watches for the wrong reasons, an artist has two choices: feed it or flip it. If there's any play left that could reset the narrative, it's radical vulnerability. Drake has tried every armor already: sarcasm, wealth, irony, deflection, the "I'm too big to lose" posture. But those moves don't work when the audience has stopped believing your control is real. What hip-hop respects more than perfection is acknowledgement. When you bleed on record, the audience bleeds with you. Think about it. The biggest rebirths in rap didn't come from winning battles. They came from surviving them. Jay-Z's Blueprint after the Nas feud, Kanye's 808s, and Heartbreak after Public collapse. Even Kendrick's own Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers was a meditation on imperfection. Each of those albums turned scrutiny into spirituality. Drake's next move could be his version of that, if he dares to go there. The irony is, the same traits that made Drake unstoppable, the calculated releases, the airtight control, the PR precision, are what's holding him back now. The audience doesn't want the perfectly mixed apology. They want the shaky, human one. A record that doesn't sound like it was cleared by lawyers or strategists, but something closer to confession than composition. Imagine Drake making an album where he drops the bravado and tells the truth about the lawsuit, the fear, the aging, the silence. Where he admits that maybe he chased validation longer than inspiration, that he's tired of playing chess with ghosts. It would be messy, sure, but it would be alive. And if history tells us anything, hip-hop forgives authenticity faster than it forgets arrogance. Because the truth is, the culture doesn't hate Drake. It's just tired of defending him. The same fans who memed the lawsuit into oblivion would stream an honest, broken Drake the moment he reappears. The world loves redemption arcs almost as much as it loves watching empires burn. But that's the trade-off. To rebuild, you have to be willing to burn. That's what separates artists who endure from artists who fade. When ego dies, art breathes. And maybe, beneath all the noise, the jokes, the lawsuits, the PR campaigns, Drake knows that. Maybe that's why he's been quiet. Maybe he's finally realizing that the only way out is through. Because no lawsuit, no appeal, No algorithm can save him now. Only music can. And if he ever finds that honesty again, if he ever drops the mask long enough to look us in the eye, then maybe, just maybe, he won't have to fight the courtroom or the culture. He'll just have to face himself. And in hip-hop, that's the hardest battle of all. When the gavel fell, it wasn't just a courtroom decision. It was a cultural one. The dismissal didn't merely end a lawsuit. It exposed the limits of power in a genre that worships dominance. Drake, the man who once dictated the pace of the entire industry, learned that no one, no matter how iconic, can out-litigate perception. The irony runs deep. The artist who built his empire on emotion tried to defend it with legality. The same pen that once turned heartbreak into hits was replaced with signatures on affidavits. And in that exchange, something crucial slipped away: authenticity. The heart of Drake's appeal was never perfection. It was the illusion that he felt everything harder than we did. But courtrooms don't feel, they measure. And when the culture sensed that shift, from emotion to entitlement, it pulled away. Every chapter of this saga reinforced one truth: hip-hop doesn't protect the comfortable. It never has. From the block to the charts, this culture rewards hunger and punishes safety. Kendrick reminded the world that the sharpest blade still belongs to the MC with nothing to lose. And Drake, for the first time, looked like a man with everything to protect and nothing left to prove. But there's a strange mercy in defeat. Losing strips away the noise. It forces clarity. For Drake, this might be the first moment in a decade where he can't hide behind metrics, memes, or brand deals. The silence that follows an L can either bury you or rebirth you. It all depends on whether you're willing to listen to what it's saying. And the message is simple. Legacy doesn't come from invincibility. It comes from evolution. If Drake accepts that, he can write the second act of his career not as a pop phenomenon, but as a human being. The world doesn't need another anthem from him. It needs perspective. Not the voice of the sixth god, but of the man behind him. The one who lost a case, lost control, but maybe found something pure in the wreckage. Because when the hits stop charting, when the lawsuits end, when the headlines fade, what's left isn't who won or lost. It's who changed. So yes, the judge dismissed the case. The memes had their run. The numbers told their story. But the final verdict? It's still being written. And maybe that's the most poetic outcome of all. In the end, Drake's greatest trial won't be fought in court or on the charts. It'll happen in the studio, with the door closed, the phone off, and no entourage to impress. Just a man, a mic, and the weight of a legacy that's finally too heavy to carry any further. That's where hip-hop legends are reborn. Not in spectacle, but in silence. And if he gets that part right, then maybe one day, the culture won't remember this era as the lawsuit, the loss, or the L. They'll remember it as the moment Drake finally became real again.